Greetings and welcome to the latest edition of the Entheogenic Evolution Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Martin, and I'm happy to have you with me today. For this week's episode, I am sharing my recent conversation with Steve Rio from Enfold in Canada. We originally had this conversation with the intention of creating a video for YouTube, which has been out at the Entheogenic Evolution YouTube channel for a little bit over the past month now. So maybe you've already caught it there, but if you haven't, I've got the full 2-hour-long talk with Steve available here on the podcast for your listening enjoyment. We decided to make this recording, again, originally as a video, so that we could really properly discuss the Leckie Protocol, which is the vaporized 5-MeO plus injection of 5-MeO DMT, as was seen with Bryan Johnson on his widely viewed live stream of his 5-MeO DMT experience the other month. And since this was the protocol that was used for Bryan Johnson, Steve wanted to come on the podcast and share more about it. We, of course, had a previous conversation, which you can still find on the podcast, about injectable 5-MeO DMT with Steve Rio. But here we're expanding on the topic. We're talking both about the Leckie Protocol as well as just 5-MeO DMT in general. So it's a wide-ranging conversation around 5-MeO DMT in addition to the specific protocol that was used. Now, because we wanted to make a video, we had the graphic that showed the level of intensity and the duration and when the vaporized 5-MeO DMT comes on, when the injectable 5-MeO DMT comes on. And that image is now used as the cover art for this podcast. So if you want to see it, look at the cover art for the podcast, or you can go by the Entheogenic Evolution YouTube channel and you can find the full video there. But I'm going to have the conversation for you here today. But first, I have a little mini interview. It's about 7 minutes long with one of the students who completed my 5-MeO DMT Integration Specialist training course with Mindscape Institute. The student in question is Jay Monger, and I invited him to do a little interview with me, talking about the class, what he feels he gained from it, and who he encourages to sign up for the class. And this is all part of my push for the fall term of the 5-MeO DMT Integration Specialist training course, which starts on September 9th. So it's just almost exactly 3 months away now, but this is a small class of 15 students. Enrollment is limited, and it is now open. You can learn more about the class at martinball.net if you want to swing by and check out the information that I have available there. I've done quite a bit to update my webpage, so there's a whole lot of information with more student testimonials, also frequently asked questions, all the basic information about the class, how long it runs, how much it costs, all of that stuff. And also to help promote the class and bring in new students, I have made a compilation of student endorsements, which also features this interview with Jay. I've put that up at the Entheogenic Evolution YouTube channel, and it's just the 5-MeO DMT Integration Specialist Training student endorsements. So you can find that video. There's a couple mini interviews in there, as well as just some audio statements that have been recorded and sent to me by some of my former students to inspire new students to sign up for the class. Okay, before we get into that, just a reminder that if you'd like to support this podcast, please stop by at patreon.com/martinwball, and you can become a supporting member of the podcast. And there's everything from $1 a month up to $100 a month, which at that top level gets you a 1-hour monthly consultation call with me via Zoom. There's no obligation. You can come and go as you like. You can change your support level at any time. And if you want to support this podcast, it's a great way to do it, and it's always appreciated. And of course, I am always available for 30, 60, or 90-minute integration calls to help you integrate your entheogenic experience from a non-dual and energetic perspective. While I specialize in 5-MeO DMT, I am not limited to that in any way, shape, or form, and I'm happy to talk to you about any of your entheogenic experiences, or if you just want to set up a conversation to talk about stuff, that's fine as well. It doesn't need to be specifically on the topic of integration, but of course, that is the main reason that people like to contact me. Okay, well, that's it for announcements. Let's have this mini interview with Jay, then get into this lengthy conversation with Steve Rio from Enfold. You can, of course, find Enfold online at enfold.org. So Jay, I'd invite you first just to introduce yourself and kind of your role in the world of 5-MeO DMT or psychedelic medicines, anything you'd want to share.
Yeah, so I'm Jay Monger, located out in Colorado, and am a therapist and do work with 5-MeO in facilitation fashion, as well as provide integration services and work at those from a therapeutic lens of helping folks to work with how to embody the work of 5-MeO that brings to us.
Great. How long have you been in the field?
So I've been working with 5-MeO for about 5 years now, and working with others just more in the last couple of years. And the same piece, I've been a therapist for about 2 years here. Yeah. After a life in the business world made the jump into a different way of being, that's for sure.
Yeah. What particular format of therapy, or what school do you come from?
So I graduated from Naropa University, and the primary modalities that I enjoy working with are Gestalt therapy and other somatic therapy orientations.
Okay, great. So what originally caught your interest in signing up for my 5-MeO DMT integration specialist training course? What inspired you?
I was really excited to see that there was a course to kind of dive in deeper. I've read pretty much all of your books, and dove into the most recent book on integration. I think I almost like the day it came out or the next day, because integration means so much to me. It's wonderful to have peak experiences. It doesn't mean a whole lot if there's not an integration process. And whether that's on your own or with someone else, in community, whatever it looks like for each individual, but knowing that there are, and you say this regularly in your training, 5-MeO is so unique, and its process of integration is unique. And so it requires a special knowledge. It's not the same as going to a psilocybin integration training or an MDMA integration training. And so when there was a course on it, it was like, yes, I want to dive deeper. I want to be able to really learn from someone that has made a profession of integration coaching around 5-MeO.
Great. So here's a question. So you read my book on integration first. What would you say is, what do you gain by actually being in class with me versus, say, just reading the book? What do you feel it might be different, or what added value would there be for people?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a book is great. A book is you disseminating information. And if I want to dive deeper, want to understand more about what you're talking, there are questions. It's not exactly the easiest thing to just quickly say, well, Martin, what did you mean by that? And I think that's one of the pieces that the course really offered, was over this period of, more than a couple months, to really learn from your experience, from your way of working, from your orientation to the world. And you engaged us as students within that process. So there were case studies, there were examples, there were, the integration call that you had 3 days ago that felt applicable to what we were working on that week, that you're just not going to get from reading a book or listening to a podcast. Real practical application, you asking us questions, engaging us as students, and that kind of process that says, like, there's a readiness then that comes at the end to move from thinking about what it is to do integration work to stepping into the world as an integration specialist.
Great. Thanks for that response, Jay. At this point, who would you recommend take the class? Like, in your mind, who do you think that this would really be applicable for?
Yeah, wow, that's a wide berth that I think can really apply to there. One, I mean, I think anyone that is facilitating this medicine could benefit from being part of that training. Integration is so important, and we may have our specific training around ceremony and facilitation, or the whatever we would call the act of engaging with 5-MeO. drawing from experience of what can happen in an integration process and how to be prepared for that beyond just the subset of people that we have worked with as facilitators or our mentors have worked with, but really getting into a wide breadth from someone who is a professional in that, I think is really important. And so much is around, how to work with this piece that comes up in those first couple weeks that handled well can be a beautiful unfolding around a challenging experience. Handled poorly can be disastrous and traumatic. And I think if you're facilitating this medicine, serving others, having knowledge of how to navigate that time period skillfully is essential. I also think anyone that's in the psychedelic integration world would really benefit from this as well. So that there's not that potential of misdiagnosing. I think it's probably the right way, misdiagnosing an integration process for something more severe from lack of understanding of the energetics around 5-MeO. And even if that's in the basis piece of, okay, I have a good understanding of it and now know how to refer out, how to recognize and that 5-MeO is very different from other integration processes. This is why, this is how to work with it and how to recognize when it's beyond my skill set. So kind of like anyone that's in the psychedelic world, I think really can benefit from this.
Oh, well, thank you, Jay. Is there anything I didn't ask you about that you feel would be important to mention about the class or what you learned from the class or anything else?
I do find it was a wonderful chance to not only learn about your integration process, but your understanding of 5-MeO, the energetics and the way that it works and how that applies to integration. So that's what I would tell folks is it's not just integration, but it's preparation, initiation, and integration all in an arc that supports someone in their journey of unfolding in their integration process.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your input on this, Jay. I really appreciate it and appreciate all that you've shared here in our little mini interview.
Thanks, Martin. Good to be with you.
As viewers can see, here is a video with me and Steve Rio. For people who follow the Entheogenic Evolution podcast, I'm sure that you're aware that I already have a podcast episode with Steve that we recorded last year about Enfold, where he works in Canada, which provides 5-MeO DMT by way of injection. So anybody who's curious, the title of that podcast episode is Enfold Injectable 5-MeO DMT with Steve Rio, and it's available on the Entheogenic Evolution YouTube channel and elsewhere. And due to recent events, Steve and I thought it'd be great for us to have another conversation about injectable 5-MeO DMT. And I thought it'd be great, why don't we just make a video? So just full disclosure right from the beginning, I normally don't make videos with people. So this is a little bit different for me. Normally we use video, we record the conversation, I put it out on the podcast. But I wanted to be able to do some screen sharing in our conversation today. So that's what has inspired this format here. And I already joked with Steve that we have got a little bit of a yin and yang kind of thing going on here, a little white and black. But Steve, welcome back. I would say welcome back to the podcast, but this is a video that will go on YouTube, so it's not actually on the podcast, but it's great to see you again.
Nice to see you again too, Martin. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So what brings us together today is the other month, there was the very public, intentionally very public administration of both injectable and vaporized 5-MeO DMT for Bryan Johnson, who, my understanding, he's one of these very, very rich guys, and he was interested that 5-MeO perhaps has, quote, longevity properties, which is not why most people take 5-MeO DMT. Let's just put that out there. And this was very public. I think it was live streamed on X. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was live streamed on X. Yeah, I think at the time of taking the dose, there was over 300,000 people watching concurrently. I think over 1 million people have probably seen that now.
Wow. That's a lot of people. That's a very public experience of 5-MeO DMT. I watched a few clips from it. I personally have some issues with X, and
fair enough.
Elon Musk. I don't like the way that he's been running X. So I try not to support X because I think he leans towards techno-fascism in ways that I don't jive with. But anyway, that's a completely different issue. But I was able to observe some of the reactions around people's comments about the process with, sorry, I spaced his name. Was it Bryan? Is that right? Mm-hmm. Bryan. So we just want to talk about all of this stuff. And one of the things that we're going to be talking about is I saw a lot of people comment like, whoa, he did both an injection and vaporizing, and look at that milligram number. Isn't that like too much? And then I also saw people commenting about, oh, well, if it's something is it's done as a performance because it's being video recorded. So I thought that was interesting. And just maybe, sorry, I'm monologuing here a little bit, Steve, but just one thing that I wanted to also say in this that I think is really worthwhile is I then saw a number of articles that were published about Bryan Johnson had his experience. And, you know, I've been public about 5-MeO-DMT for the past over 18 years now. And one of the things that frustrates me is when popular articles get written about 5-MeO is that they almost always contain incorrect information. And so this is something that I also saw in sort of the aftermath of Bryan Johnson's experience was articles saying, oh, well, in the past, people used to lick toads to get 5-MeO-DMT. That is a myth.
That's incorrect.
I've never, ever, ever licked toads. There's no evidence for that, ever. Then also saw people saying, oh, this is the most powerful form of DMT. 5-MeO-DMT is not DMT. DMT is its own molecule. 5-MeO-DMT, that's another molecule. And then also saw people writing about how, well, modern psychonauts have learned how to extract 5-MeO-DMT more efficiently from the Sonoran desert toad, and therefore are having more powerful experiences from back when they used to lick it. And this is just another absolute fallacy. Nobody extracts 5-MeO from toad secretions. And the toad secretions had absolutely nothing to do with Bryan Johnson's experience. So those are just some repeated myths and inaccuracies that we see just repeated in the media. So with 5-MeO sort of having this moment within the broader consciousness and media, but there's still a lot of misunderstandings and just a lot of blatantly incorrect information that's put out there.
Yeah. It's it's whenever, like when you're an expert in something and then it goes into the mainstream zeitgeist, it's always really complicated because you just pray and hope that people are going to talk about it with some sophistication, and that almost never happens. I mean, look at what happened with mushrooms, quote unquote mushrooms, right? And for multiple years, all the headlines were John Hopkins doing mushroom trials. Well, they were working with synthetic psilocybin. All of this clinical trials do not involve, none of them, well, maybe I'm not going to say none of them, most of them do not involve mushrooms. And all the headlines say mushrooms do this and mushrooms do that. And all the headlines were mushrooms cure depression, right? So this is not new and it's not going to go away. And it's been interesting watching that happen now with 5-MeO. And, it makes me kind of think as people in the space, what's our responsibility? What's our opportunity? How do we participate in, because I've seen a lot of people say, oh, this should never happen. People shouldn't do this kind of thing. We shouldn't, but on the same token, everybody wants to raise awareness about the potential of psychedelics. So you can't really have both, sooner or later, somebody famous or somebody big is going to, sooner or later, Oprah is going to talk about her ayahuasca journeys or whatever. And these things, Tony Robbins has done that and people have done stuff like that. So we can't stop that from happening. How do we respond? But what we're seeing is this massive gap in the education of the mainstream zeitgeist. It's just a huge gap.
Yeah. And I think with 5-MeO, it's tricky because I think it's kind of inherently fascinating for people that there is this incredibly potent molecule that does come from a toad.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting, right? This idea that people take the secretions of this toad. Oh, and this is another one. It's almost uniformly described as the venom of the Sonoran desert toad. And it's a sticking point. It's just semantics. But I was just kind of ranting a little bit on how often, again, in the media, it is described as the venom of the Sonoran desert toad. And it's just semantics, but it's a technical point that it's not venom. Venom is something that is injected into the body via a bite or a sting. And toads don't bite anyone, that they have these large glands on their body. And if you squeeze them, or if they're attacked by a predator, and a predator comes and grips it with their mouth, that then it secretes these secretions. They're secretions. It's not venom, right? There's no such thing as a venomous toad. Like that's, mean, nasty teeth would be the venomous toad. And I think that it just plays into that there's something of a little bit of a thrill with this idea that, oh, it's a toad, and like what a bizarre creature for this potent molecule to come from. But I think it's a really good point that you made, that often when these things are discussed in the media, it kind of falls into almost unconsciously that something that we see a lot of in the psychedelic community is sometimes a really radical distinction between what is deemed to be organic and natural, and therefore plant medicine and good, versus, something synthetic made in a lab and therefore it's bad. But it's really important to distinguish that when it comes to scientific studies and medical studies, they're not using the organic products, that they're using the pure molecules, because that's the only way that you can guarantee that you're dealing with precise levels and dosages, that you can never get that from an organic source, because there's going to be variability in the concentration.
That's right. And I think there's, I think in general, humans, we have this aversion to human-made. It's like when we say lab synthetic, we're actually talking about human-made. Humans are nature. Everything is nature. Sometimes we distort nature in ways that's not healthy. Sometimes we can recreate nature in ways that is almost identical. Like when you vaporize 5-MeO-DMT, the pure molecule, or you vaporize bufo, all the other alkaloids burn off, and what you're left with is 5-MeO-DMT. It doesn't matter how it doesn't matter if that 5-MeO-DMT was made in a petri dish with algae and it was enzymatically created, or it was synthesized. If it's 5-MeO-DMT, it's 5-MeO-DMT, and it doesn't actually matter. But people, we like to fantasize about the meaning of it when it's coming from a plant versus when it's coming from a lab. I think there's I'm purely through that. I personally find that most synthetics, and this gets, a lot of people, disagree with me, and that's fine. But I prefer synthetic molecules much more often, because I find it's easier on the digestive system. It's easier on my liver. It's a clearer experience. And that's what I prefer personally. And I totally understand if you and I also understand, for mushrooms, there's something about the gut and about getting mushrooms into the gut. And maybe there's some other healing benefits or health benefits. And I'm open to that too. But as far as having a psychedelic journey or a trip or whatever you want to call it, I personally prefer synthetic.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
Yeah. I would say that I do as well. That I like that in my own personal phenomenological experience, I do think that it's a pure and cleaner experience. It's just less complicated by other physiological things. Like you mentioned with mushrooms, a long running little personal joke of mine is that, mushrooms would be perfect if they didn't give me gas. But, they do. That I get discomfort in my digestive system, and I don't find that it contributes to the experience versus, I did a lot of work with 4-ACO DMT, which is a pure...
Yeah, I love 4-ACO.
But it's so clean, right? And I find, for me, absent the gas and the digestive issues and the burping and the taste, that I don't really experience much of a phenomenological difference between 4-ACO DMT and psilocybin mushrooms. This is like psilocybin, just without having to eat a bunch of mushrooms.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you, except I actually find 4-ACO DMT to be clearer. Like you can hold a thread more clearly with 4-ACO-DMT. And I find that I bring more back with me than I do mushrooms, because mushrooms, I think they're sort of swirling around a lot, which is okay. But I love the clarity of 4-ACO-DMT. And then just from a purely enjoyment or phenomenology perspective, I love the increased visual aspect of 4-ACO-DMT. It's much more DMT-ish. It's much more crystalline. It's actually, to me, closer to an ayahuasca experience, minus all the gastrointestinal stuff, than it is mushrooms. I just really enjoy it. To me, it's far superior, and I really enjoy it.
Yeah, and it's easy to work with. And I just want to give a little shout out to myself here, because earlier you mentioned a phrase that I started promoting back sort of in the earlier days of the 5-MeO public discourse, where there was really some strong claims made on the bufo side that bufo is better, and that it produces effects that the synthetic molecule doesn't produce. So that was back in the 20-teens, and I introduced the phrase of, well, let's just call synthetic 5-MeO, let's call it the pure molecule.
Sure.
That I introduced, because I wanted to bring it out of that ideological divide of organic versus synthetic, and that somehow something that's synthetic is inherently less than. It's just a proposition that I myself don't agree with, and so wanted to use language to kind of indicate that there's something of value actually if we're going synthetic, because it is pure and it does provide a cleaner experience. And something that comes up a lot that with people that I speak with.
Yeah.
And, this is not a judgment. This is not to say that something is better or something is worse. But in my experience, many people who have experienced both bufo and the pure molecule of 5-MeO tend to say, not that they think one is better than the other, but when they're comparing them, they often say, very similar to what you just said about 4-ACO versus mushrooms, is that the pure molecule just seems to be a cleaner, smoother, and clearer experience to some degree, versus bufo is a bit more tumultuous, a bit more jagged, a bit more rough in some ways. And these are very relativistic kind of descriptions in terms, but I think that people who have been able to compare the two from their own experience, that they tend towards agreement with those statements. I don't know if you've experienced anything like that.
Yeah, I think that's right. I've worked with both, and there is a slight feel variance, and there's a few other overtones or undertones or whatever you want to call them to bufo that maybe aren't there with 5. And ultimately, I think it's preference, and I mean, we can have the ethical conversation about milking toads and all that stuff. But if we're just purely talking about which one is better, I don't think either is better or worse. I just think people have preferences. I think most people who are more in the synthetic side of their preference, they're not generally being like, well, yeah, but organics are terrible and they're bad and you shouldn't do them. I think there's more coming from the other side. There's more of an ideological thing going on with people who are like standing up for plants or standing up for, which I also think it's like, we're always talking about all the extraction that humans do. Well, we don't have to extract vines out of the Amazon if we just synthesize DMT, and we don't need to extract toads if we're synthesizing 5-MeO, DMT, 5-MeO. We don't need to extract peyote if we're synthesizing mescaline.
Yeah. And that actually brings me to another recent development that was put out there in numerous stories about how some scientists genetically engineered a tobacco plant to produce a number of different molecules, including 5-MeO. And so then these articles came out saying, well, would this be a replacement for toad secretions, that, here we can have a bioavailable source of 5-MeO DMT, and then we wouldn't have to harvest from the toads. But it completely missed the point of, you don't need to use a tobacco plant to do this. You don't need to genetically, you just make it in a lab. I mean, that's all you need to do is make it in a lab.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, exactly. I don't know if all of these innovation type things are fueled by the potential of process patents, potentially of just like, if I come up with a new process for making 5-MeO, then I can patent that, and I can call that I can enforce that. from a patent, or if it's just scientists, bored scientists. Because if you're a scientist, why not nerd out and try and figure out how to grow 5-MeO on a tobacco plant? Like, that sounds interesting and fun. But the utility of that, I agree. I'm not sure. Like, why are we looking for another way? Ultimately, the last 20 years or so, the natural marketing, in food has become this whole thing about like natural or organic or all. It's kind of all natural thing, which there's some merit to that, of course. But then it's translated into wellness products, where a lot of times people are talking about a final, what you're actually left with, which is a molecule. It actually has if you get a 5-MeO molecule, and if it was made on a tobacco plant or it was made in algae, which is something that people can do, you can grow 5-MeO in algae. People have shown that you can grow it in a mushroom, or you can synthesize it, or you can take it from a toad and extract it out of the toad secretion. It's just 5-MeO. So what's the simplest way? 5-MeO is actually quite easy to synthesize. It's not all that complicated. I think, in relative terms, it's fairly low cost. Yeah, seems pretty obvious.
This is genetically engineering a tobacco plant and then trying to increase the production value of that, and then going through the extraction process. It's just a lot of unnecessary steps. Now, as pure science, pretty cool, right?
Yeah, totally.
We got a tobacco plant to grow a bunch of tryptamines, but it's just not necessary. I think part of it, you are in Canada, and it's a different world in Canada, because in Canada, 5-MeO is not illegal, and it was made illegal in the United States. Was it like January 19th of 2011 is when it was made, specifically made illegal in the United States. And this is right around the time that 5-MeO first started being noticed more publicly. I'm part of the reason for that. I started my podcast in 2008 and had my first 5-MeO experience in January of 2008. And I was like, this is something I'm going to be spending the rest of my life talking about, because this is the most important molecule that exists on the planet. And, I've brought people like James Orrock on, brought Hal from the Temple of Awakening Divinity. And then around this same time, toad was becoming popular in Mexico. And so awareness was starting to spread out around 5-MeO. And then it was made illegal. And here in the United States, and prior to that, I will reveal that I could order 10 grams of 5-MeO from China for like $200 before it was made illegal. Super easy to get. And it would show up in the mail. This is not a problem. It wasn't an illegal substance. Now, possibly could be prosecuted through the Analogs Act, but the effect of that ultimately was that whereas prior to it being made illegal, it was fairly easy for people in the United States to get the pure molecule of 5-MeO. But then in making it illegal, that actually tremendously upped the pressure on harvesting secretions from the toads, because people could just go out into the desert, catch a toad and squeeze it and do that all on their own. And so it actually promoted the harvesting of toad secretions. And so now we kind of see this divide where in the United States, a lot of people who facilitate 5-MeO experiences work with toad secretions because it's easier to get. Also very, very popular in Mexico to work with toad secretions. But in Canada, where it has not been scheduled, you can tell the audience, how easy is it for you to get 5-MeO that you administer at Enfold? Is it difficult?
Well, I could tell two stories. So, but one part is we have been able, we work at a bit of a different quality and scale. So we work directly with a lab, which we have to build a relationship with. We buy in fairly large volumes. We're working with 99.8% pure 5-MeO, and so we're working in a bit of a different class of substance than most people. But it's funny, in 5-MeO, you can buy 5-MeO vape pens in stores downtown. You can buy them on the internet. You can buy them from well branded, nice packaging. It is a consumer product in Canada right now. That is technically illegal. It is not a substance that you can technically sell as a product, but there is no enforcement of that. So it is rampant right now, along with, there's all the mushroom stores in Vancouver. So if you come to Vancouver, you can walk into a store and and it's a beautiful display. It looks like, some of them look like Apple stores, but it's just filled with like 30 or 40 strains of mushrooms, and they're really beautifully grown and they're excellent. And the clerk or person working there will tell you this strain is for that, and this strain is, it's quite sophisticated. I don't know how much background knowledge there actually is there, but either way, it's interesting. And you can buy, DMT, 5-MeO DMT, all sorts of stuff. So it's a bit of a wild situation up here right now. I'm very liberal about psychedelics. I don't think we should be randomly selling 5-MeO vape pens to everybody. I'm a little nervous about that, to be honest. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, it's not really an idea that I'm terribly supportive of, because as you and I both know, as I'm sure the viewing audience probably knows as well, is that even a small dose of 5-MeO, while it doesn't last very long, it still is incredibly potent. And this can be, even for a seasoned psychonaut, this can be surprising, because you might think, oh, I'm only taking 1 or 2 milligrams. And it only lasts for a couple minutes, but it comes on so quickly and it is so powerful that it's startling. And like the idea, okay, so I use my cannabis vape pen, right? So cannabis is legal in the United States. I've been using cannabis since I was like 15 years old. And, take a hit off of that and it's not a big deal, right? Especially as someone who's been saturated with cannabis for a number of years, it's not a big deal. But just imagining, like, if somebody accidentally or unintentionally grabbed a 5-MeO vape pen thinking, oh, this is just a hit of cannabis. I mean, the difference is startling. And that I've always advised for anybody who wants to work with 5-MeO, I've always encouraged, please work with a skilled facilitator, at least for the first several times that you're working with it, because it's incredibly potent. And once we get into those non-dual states, your ego is not going to be there to take care of you or to decide what you should or should not do. And it's very important to have someone who knows how to work with people in those states to protect and guide you through that. And that you might start releasing traumas or enacting some kind of unconscious patterning and processing that you don't have any control over. And you're not going to know that until you have that experience. And therefore, just don't do it on your own. And then I get a little bit more flexible if people say, well, I've done like 5 sessions, 5 full release doses with a facilitator. I want to start working with it on my own. And at that point I say, well, okay, if you have a good idea of how well you're able to ride through that, it is potentially safer for you to do it on your own. Please, I agree. Have a facilitator introduce you first. Don't just go out and get your own vape pen and start working with it. But I think that's just very dangerous.
Yeah, I agree with all that. Yeah. I just think, I don't, it's funny, the proliferation of 5 pens, not only do more people, I think, what we're seeing in our work here is that 3 years ago, maybe even less, most people that came to see us had never worked with 5. So they were signing up, they're investing in their first 5 experience in a proper container, Now I would say 30, sometimes 40% of guests have done 5-MeO before, and they're often coming to see us as a corrective experience or as a, hey, I experienced 5 and I could see the power of it, but I didn't really get it because the container wasn't right. Like I didn't know, nobody prepared me for it. Nobody integrated it with me. So it's interesting to see how many people now are accessing 5. Like it just shown me in a couple of years how quickly it's dispersed. And this is mostly Americans, but a lot of Canadians and Europeans and Asian, like folks from Asia and stuff too. So it's quickly becoming much more popular everywhere. So that's an interesting thing. And here, at least in Canada, the 2 things that are happening, one is that vape pens are very easy to get. So it's really easy to become a 5-MeO facilitator. And it's really, I think in general, like I get the inclination once you do something like this, and if you have a good experience, that you want to evangelize it, and you want to share it with your friends. Like that's a natural impulse. I don't think it's a very safe thing to do, or it does, it's misguided, but it's a positive, it's a generally makes sense as an impulse. But it's very easy to become a little mini shaman and roll around with your 5-pen and go to your buddy's house and serve everybody 5. By being able to buy these vape pens you can buy fairly strong vape pens off the internet. Like you can buy breakthrough vape pens on the internet. So suddenly everybody has access to it. And that's a little sketchy. And I just think we just need to keep educating people. And the message is exactly what you said. Don't do it alone, never do it alone the first time ever, or never do it with somebody who doesn't know what they're doing the first time ever.
Yeah.
It's like it's like that and Ibogaine, and maybe some of the other super strong, like maybe you don't want to do ayahuasca by yourself, but who's doing that anyway.
Right.
But like a lot of the psychedelics, I'm pretty liberal about. It's like, you know what, when I was 14 or whatever, I did some pretty massive heroic doses of mushrooms and survived. I was fine. I'm so glad I didn't have a strong vape pen at 5-MeO vape pen at 14 by myself.
Yeah. Yeah. I think just jumping on what you were saying there, sort of the evangelist phase. This is also something I went through myself. Many people in the 5-MeO world, we kind of recognize it. This is it's a natural response that, particularly for people who have a really positive experience, sort of the heart of love is this desire to share, particularly something that's positive. That when we experience something that, and let's just be clear, and in my opinion, a positive experience with 5-MeO DMT is incomparable to any other experience that a human being can have. Like this is like the pinnacle of human experience because it's so awe-inspiring and so amazing. And so then the natural inclination is, I want to share this with everyone I love and everyone I care about, and that I want to tell everyone about it, and I want them to have the same experience I had. Again, I think that's normal and it's natural because it is overwhelmingly positive. The difficulty is that that's not going to be everyone's experience. And when we have had a positive experience, we might mistakenly assume that, this is going to be everyone's experience. And for me, it was so easy. All I had to do was take a hit, and it was the most amazing experience, the most life-affirming experience possible. And what we miss then is that some people are going to have a traumatic experience. Some people are not going to be able to let go of their ego, and it's going to be a battle, and it's going to be a fight, and that there can be all kinds of difficult materials that arise within someone's experience. And in my opinion and experience, I've found that it's not really possible to make accurate predictions with people. That this is why, like I just released a video on my channel called the 5-MeO diagnostic round, where I make the argument that until you get to that full release dose level, you can't really diagnose like how is this person going to be able to manage it. That working up to it, you can get some information, but it's so categorically different that once we hit that full release dose level, that's where we're able to really learn, okay, this person can let go, this person can't. This one has deep trauma that needs to be worked out. This person needs to scream and run around, right? But we don't know until we get there.
I agree. It's when at the beginning of the Leckie Protocol, there's a section saying, as kind of a disclaimer saying, this is a pretty intense administration approach with 5-MeO DMT. And we've developed it in the sense that we have 2 full days in person with the guests before we even do this. We've spent 3 weeks preparing them. There's all these steps. And I agree with you. Like we do our best. We do some very light dose work on day 1, where we work, in the 1 to 1.5 milligram range. You get a little bit of sense of where their nervous system is at and how they talk about it after and how much they can connect with the experience. And some people go deep, and so you start to get a feel. We do some heart opening work the next day. You get a feel for what's really under the hood. But we've still learned that you just never make assumptions about what the actual ceremony is going to look like, because we've seen people who have really heavy trauma profiles, maybe serious abuse profiles or something like that, childhood abuse profiles, have incredibly beautiful journeys and very easy and light. And we've had people who seem like they're going to breeze through it, get walloped, And the truth is, both are great. Both are great experiences. I don't discriminate. And I think, working through that tough stuff, that muck is like just as important. It's not as fun. But it's actually potentially at certain points in people's lives, potentially more transformative than having a pure white light experience right off the bat. It just depends. Like white light experiences are, exceptional. I think if you polled people who serve this medicine, I don't know what the percentage was, but I guess it's close to 100 that had amazing first experiences. Like that's why we're doing this. That's true for Austin and I for sure. And true for most anybody I've asked. I haven't heard anybody say, yeah, it was super brutal the first time and now I'm serving it. I've never heard that.
Yeah. So go ahead. It didn't mean
I was just going to say, like, after our first experience, Austin, I had an incredibly beautiful first experience. And since then I've had many, many, many very challenging experiences. I think there's like a little difference of like, I was letting go, but I was also just processing all the shame in my system. And I was processing, all this different stuff. Like that's part of the work too. And that's all good. But the letting go piece is, in my experience, it's a pretty low percentage of people that are actually ready for white light journeys off the bat.
Yeah. And I think it's important, just as you're highlighting here in this conversation, that the white light experience it's subjectively better in our direct experience because it's amazing. But that doesn't mean that the difficult or challenging or, in the thick of the muck experience, that's not worse. That actually might be more transformative and more necessary for someone. But the important point to speak to what you're saying here is that most people who facilitate started off with, that was amazing. I want to give this amazing experience to other people. And that if people jump into facilitation prematurely without understanding the full spectrum of what happens with 5-MeO, then those facilitators are often unprepared when somebody does have a difficult or challenging experience. And then, I work on the integration side, and a lot of people who have a difficult experience, they are of the belief that maybe they did something wrong or there's something wrong with them, or they say, well, my facilitator just told me it was going to be beautiful and it wasn't beautiful. It was terrifying. So what's wrong with me? What did I do wrong? And then sometimes facilitators themselves, if they're inexperienced, they might reinforce that by saying, whoa, we've only served people and they've had beautiful experiences. Like, I don't know what's up with you.
I know that's the worst. Like that deflection it's actually a real disservice when that deflection happens. Yeah.
Yeah. And it just comes from the fact that a lot of people who facilitate, they jumped in too early. They were feeling they're just riding that high of that white light experience and not really educating themselves or educating their potential clients about what really is the full range of the 5-MeO experience, what might be possible. And again, as we've been emphasizing, is that you can't really predict with anyone. You can't just look at someone and say, oh, I think you're going to have a great time. I think it's going to be all white light for you. Like, you just don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I always say the only thing I can promise you is it will be intense.
Yeah.
Like that's the guarantee. 100% of the time it's intense and everything else is variable. I was thinking as you were talking, I'm realizing that I think I really got lucky in that this was before I had my first experience, and then we had a facilitator. We brought him in to kind of learn from him, and he was going to host at our home, and we were recruiting friends and people who wanted to come have this experience. And I had a friend, an older guy, very, very smart, done a lot of meditation, just felt like, and I just went for a walk with him. I was like, this is going to be so beautiful. And I kind of pitched him the white light, because that's all I knew yet. I mean, I wasn't even a facilitator. So I was just like, you should come do this thing. It's going to be awesome. And he got just absolutely walloped, like just screaming into the ground, fuck, like the darkest experience. And it took him probably 3 or 6 months to fully integrate the experience. Luckily, he's a fairly resourced guy, has some money that, didn't need to go back to work the next day or something like that. Like, luckily he had a very, very hard, classically very hard integration. Probably a lot of the kind of folks that find you saying, I need help kind of guy. And that was this was about 1.5 years before we started serving, but that was my second experience with the medicine, was sitting and watching that happen.
Yeah.
And so I got the chance to be like, oh, here's a guy who I look up to and think is a great meditator and was super low key and not nervous at all about coming into the experience. And then just got smacked. And I just feel I'm realizing now how lucky I was to get to witness that early on. Because I always say to people, if you want to serve this medicine, witness 50 ceremonies and actually do integration work, like follow up with people. Because that's the other piece that's missing is a lot of people hold the pen for somebody or hand the pen to somebody, but they don't do the follow-up. So they actually don't know how hard it is a month from now. Even if people have great experiences, like we also find this phenomenon where some people with a lot of trauma have a beautiful, loving, like the medicine just shows them love. And it's kind of like the impetus they need to start this process of facing their trauma in a way, but it starts to pour out in the weeks and months after, actually. So that's the hardest part, not the journey itself. And if you're not paying attention, if you're not in communication with people afterwards, you don't know what's happening in their world. Like you actually don't know what the sort of rubble you're leaving in the back. You know what I mean? You got to be, I think a lot of facilitators, just because they're not offering that service of following up and integration or connection with their previous clients, that they don't know.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point. Like often when people contact me and say, hey, I'm going to be having an experience on this day, can I schedule an integration call with you, say the next day?
Yeah.
What I will do is I will advise, why don't you actually wait a few days between your session and when you're coming for integration? Because we don't really know how things are going to land and what energies are going to be up for you, because it often doesn't show up right away. And I think this is a really important distinction that you're making here, is that the integration time period is not necessarily determined by the experience that the person had. So in other words, somebody might have what they experience as a very difficult and challenging experience with 5-MeO, but might actually have a very pleasant and enjoyable integration period because they've been through the worst of it, in a sense. And then other people might have that white light, divine grace experience and just feel like they're on top of the world. And then 3-4 days later, suddenly they're processing some kind of uncovered trauma, and it becomes scary, challenging, and difficult. And even the most positive experience might bring up challenging material afterwards and have a difficult energetic process. And that there's so much time after a powerful 5-MeO experience for things to continue to move and process, that it's, again, if people are facilitating that aren't really aware of this or don't really attend to this, that they're just going to have a very limited understanding of how 5-MeO actually works with people. And that for those of us in the field who want to be conscientious about it, that we need to be aware of all these things. And that a positive experience doesn't mean it's going to be easy afterwards. And also a challenging experience doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be challenging, but there's all these potentials. And at a very general level, what I've always liked to share over the years is that I've seen two basic trajectories with 5-MeO. One is somebody takes their first full release dose and it's just that white light, divine, non-dual, infinite, unconditional love. And it's amazing. I mean, we can't overstate how amazing it is. But then after that, kind of like you were describing for yourself, it's actually really common that it becomes more personal and individuated afterwards, where, for example, lots of people say, well, the first time I got the white light experience, and I've done it 20 times, and I've never gotten the white light experience again, that it's been more about dealing with my crap. And so this kind of this unwinding and deconstruction process. And then the other general trajectory is that some people need to go through an extensive process of unwinding, deconstructing, encountering, releasing, letting go. And then eventually they get to, oh, I can just surrender. And it is this beautiful, loving experience. But it's just, our knowledge is incomplete if we're just telling everyone, oh, it's going to be beautiful for everyone every time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Or that's the point, or that's, or that if that doesn't happen, there's something wrong with the person, or we're always, we may have mentioned this last time we talked, but I think what we're always discussing internally here is, how do we really be as upfront about what might happen without freaking people out, without implanting negativity into the experience, like without, kind of placeboing in the worst possible experience. because we're also very suggestive as humans, right? So you got to like draw that balance. But I think we'd rather make sure people have really clear, informed consent about how big and how challenging this can be, and also what to do if that happens. Like, it's ultimately, if you know how to, when the medicine hits, because 5-MeO is so, at the high dose at least, is so, it's not an intellect, you're not intellectually processing the sadness of your 3-year-old. You're just feeling it. You're just feeling the energy in your system that is stuck. And so you're finally feeling that pain or that sadness or that fear. And if you have been prepared to orient yourself towards, hey, whatever comes, welcome it, like fall back into it, dive into it like a pool, just feel the energy of it, just move through it. Don't think about it. Don't worry about it. Don't fix it. Just feel it. Feel it all. Welcome, 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 welcome. And that can be really, really incredible. Like like you say, some people have really hard experiences, and the next day they wake up feeling like $1 million, like, and that's amazing, because they actually just were able to feel through a ton of stuck energy in their nervous system. Ultimately, that's kind of all this is just working through energy in the nervous system.
Yeah.
Right?
That's why I like to educate people on that, with the idea of this is going to amplify every energy possible. And it can find anywhere that you might be stuck or unprocessed, or that might have energy that you need to attend to. But kind of along the lines of what you're saying here is that the job is to go all the way into it and allow yourself to feel that, but you don't need to fix it. You don't need to figure it out. You don't need to do anything about it. And so I think educating people along these lines, saying, yeah, like some energies are challenging. Some are really pleasant and ecstatic. We're going to be going into big energy. Your job is to allow yourself to go all the way in, meet whatever arises there, and process that and feel it. That giving people that understanding, I think, can help prepare them for the reality of the experience. And it's just, I always find it tragic when somebody has a difficult experience or even a difficult integration afterwards. And I mean, honestly, sometimes people are in tears and they're just like, nobody told me it could be like this. And sometimes people say, I never would have chosen to work with this if somebody had told me that this was a possibility. Now, we can't actually know if that's true, because maybe somebody said, look, here's the good and the bad, here's the difficult and here's the easy. And people still might say, yeah, I do it anyway. But if somebody has not been told, if they have just been given this spiritual spotlight of, oh, it's going to be this white light, it's going to be so beautiful. If that's all they've been told, then they are going to have a more difficult time. And just that sense of, oh man, I really made the wrong decision. And nobody told me it would be like this. I wish somebody had told me. And that's I'm always on the side of, let's educate people and let them make informed decisions for themselves.
Yeah. And as you're speaking, what comes to me on that is just that the whole point of this experience is to energetically process like stuff that's been stuck a long time, because things happened at a time where we were overwhelmed by something and it got stuck in our system. Right. And so we're 3 years old and something happens and we freak out and we lock it in. And this is a chance to finally push, like, let that energy move. And again, you don't need to do anything except express the energy in whatever way feels natural. But when we don't educate people, when people aren't educated about it, actually just recreates the exact same scenario of, I thought this was going to be okay. It's not okay. I guess life is scary. It literally reinforces the exact same paradigm that people are coming to work through to overcome, right? This paradigm that we have anything to be afraid of, that we are in any way not fully, immutable. But it's really interesting. Like it just recreates that loop for people that I thought I was going to be okay, and I am not okay. And now I have to be fearful.
Yeah. And that's where, again, with that education, that preparation, and that feedback with the facilitator, that's where I find that a facilitator can really help people, even in the moment, to help them face those difficult energies and really move through them with grace, rather than fighting with them or trying to fix them or trying to stop them. I mean, yeah, it's intense. I sort of jokingly use the phrase of the cosmic washing machine. And most people say I felt like the whole universe was turning inside out through me. And like, that was intense and that was hard. It's like, yeah, but if you just let it happen, do come out the other end and you feel clean. But if we react with fear and this is wrong, I need to stop it, that's the recipe for a potentially disastrous and traumatic experience. And here again is where if the facilitator is inexperienced and they see this happening with someone and they think, oh God, there's something really wrong happening, then they add that panic energy into the client's experience, and then it just spirals out of control. And that it needs to be met with grace and met with poise. And that's, again, where a skilled, experienced facilitator makes such a powerful difference with the 5-MeO experience. And that's why it's so important. Like, please, anybody watching this or listening to this, like, if you're approached by someone's like, yeah, I've tried it a few times and I want to share it with you, just like go find somebody who actually knows what they're doing. Go to Enfold in Canada and just go to any commissions.
But just go somewhere with people like what you just described to me. The ideal work of a facilitator is that they know how to hold their nervous system in a neutral and loving and open and compassionate way, like you said, so that when that huge energetic release is happening, that person's nervous system is receiving, hey, it's okay. This is totally fine. I'm here with you. I'm going to help you ride it out, and you're good. Like, this is good. This is fine. That's a big part of the whole experience, which again, it keeps mimicking back. If you're 3 years old and you're upset and your mom gets equally as upset or gets upset that you're upset, that is not a good, that is going to reinforce a lack of safety in your nervous system. And what we're working to mostly do with people is help correct those imbalances in the nervous system, or those stucknesses in the nervous system, and letting people finally work through that stuff, work through their deepest, darkest emotions in a safe container, and where they've been contextualized to realize this is not going to kill you. Anything you feel today, anything you experience is your nervous system.
Yeah.
You're carrying it around anyway. So either we turn around and face the boogeyman, or the boogeyman just keeps following you around for the rest of your life. So that's really the choice we're making. And it's really powerful when you turn around.
Yeah. And that's where the facilitator, as you say, if they are grounded and clear and present in their own nervous system.
Yeah.
We are dealing with, when somebody consumes 5-MeO, those normal boundaries and borders that we have through the ego, those are being dissolved. And whether or not someone is consciously aware of how the facilitator is behaving in the space, they're actually going to be feeling that their own nervous system is going to be open and receptive to that. So how the facilitator works in the space it doesn't determine the outcome, but it has a huge impact on how things proceed. And this is where, as you say, if somebody has had an opportunity to observe a lot of different people having a 5-MeO experience, then their nervous system has now been acclimated to, there's this whole range of events that might take place. I don't need to freak out, right? And like, this is something that happens. So I don't know if you guys allow this at Enfold, but back when I facilitated, that I always said that the client can bring a witness if they want, or they can bring several witnesses. I don't care. You can bring people with you. But I always gave a little talk and had instructions that if you are witnessing, it's very important for you just to remain neutral, even if your friend or loved one, even if they seem to be going through something horrific. I need you to trust that they're going to be okay. You are not to intervene. You are not to come at them with panicked energy. And that if I, as the facilitator, feel that you are not able to just maintain a neutral, energetic presence, I may ask you to leave the room. And if the person having their session feels that your energy or presence is disruptive to their process, they also have the right to ask you to leave the room. And it's not personal. It's just that we do need to maintain a certain energetic hygiene within this space so that people aren't unnecessarily being imprinted with panic or worry or concern, or that you're freaking out over here on the side, and that's going to feed into their experience. And let alone like how the facilitator is handling themselves. I didn't need to lecture myself because I know how to handle my stuff.
Yeah.
in that context. But I just think it's very important to understand that these dynamics are all at play, and that it's not just the person having their experience. It's in the context of who's serving them, how they're being served, what's going on in this space. And this is also why I am not a fan when I see people's videos of, I was served toad on a beach in Mexico, and there were people walking by and watching me have my process. And then I got up and I ran down the beach because, I'm trying to get away from it. That I think it's important to have a carefully secured space where
I agree.
you can have this very vulnerable and intimate experience and just not be impinged by other energies that may or may not understand what's going on.
I agree. Or there's like these circles where there's like 10 people or 12 people in the circle and somebody's in the middle getting served 5, and you are then energetically interacting with all of the anxieties and all of the projected fears and all of the stuff that's happening in that circle that is impinging on your ability to just relax yourself, which is hard enough as it is for one person, let alone having to manage all of those energies.
Yeah. So on that question at Enfold, do you allow witnesses, or do you have a policy on that? Like, how do you guys?
Yeah, we allow witnesses. So our, the container, it's groups of 6. So we don't allow people to join for the week with somebody if they aren't participating in the process, just because it creates a strange dynamic. Like everybody is going through something together, but a lot of times people come with a good friend or with a sibling or with a partner. And in those cases, more than welcome to sit in on each other's ceremonies and witness. And it's funny, almost word for word what you just described. I don't need to repeat it. The 2 words we say is just, please remain neutral and compassionate. Compassionate is different than empathetic. You are not here to absorb their feelings and make them your feelings. You are just here to hold loving, neutral space for them and just project love towards them and hold neutrality. Because it's also really easy for people who grew up, there's a lot of people grow up having to caretake parents and stuff like that. And so they build these sort of things like, I got to make you better. And so they start to project their own anxieties into the person or kind of co-opt the experience by trying to fix it, So exactly the same messaging, and also the same messaging around, hey, we're going to make this agreement that we're going to do this and you're going to sit in, but at any point, anyone can pull the ripcord, including me, or like as a facilitator, us, or the participant or the observer. If this is too intense for you, just step out of the room. And everybody agrees that we are all allowed to take care of ourselves in whatever way we need to, because that's the primary concern here. So exactly the same thing.
All right, great. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
So I want to get into the Leckie Protocol and talk more specifically about that. But first, actually, just since we were talking about witnesses, what it made me think of is, let's talk about the topic of filming. And like with this experience with Bryan Johnson, which was filmed and then it was streamed live, and then all kinds of people have been able to watch it. And now he's done a number of interviews afterwards and he's talking all about it. And, I've watched some of those and I like what he has to say about his experience itself. But over at Enfold, like, what is the policy around video recording? Like, what are your own thoughts around that? I have lots of my own thoughts on it.
Sure.
But I'm curious, like,
so a couple things. One is, by default, every ceremony is technically being recorded by a security camera. We have that in the room for us, actually, because when people are unconscious and they may make assumptions about something that happened because of some fear they experienced. Right. So anyway, so that's just by default. That footage is never viewed by anyone. It's essentially stored on a hard drive in case of any issues. It's never been one. But the second thing, we actually proactively take short videos and some photos for people, like, just little iPhone videos of peak moments of their experience in order to share them just privately with that person if they would like them, usually about 2 to 3 weeks later, once the dust is settled. But I think it can be really helpful to see back what was the expression of your nervous system when you weren't there, and what was the sound you made. And sometimes that can help connect some dots or help people realize, oh yeah, there is this sadness in me, or there is an anger in me that I should really work with. It helps to close some loops for people. And I think that can be very valuable, because regardless of how much people would like to just let go and let the mind go, the mind comes back online after this experience and says, what the heck just happened? Did anything happen? Did this work? Did it not? There's a lot of chirping of the mind. The mind is not a huge fan of this, or the ego or the psyche, I guess is what I'm talking about. Not a big fan of this whole thing.
Right.
And so it's mostly looking for ways to undermine the progress, which is why some people have these beautiful experiences. And then weeks later, the mind is so confronted with the potential that we could be loved in that way that it just gets really dark. It goes in, all the fear loops start up, but that's an aside. But so anyway, we do some short filming. Once in a while we have guests asked to set up a camera and film their own ceremony in entirety, which in general we are fine with. It's totally fine. The considerations I feel are one is when we filmed for an audience, like we shot a documentary back in August. So that was in a case where we have cameras in the room shooting all the things through the week. We know that that's going to potentially have some impact. So I think when third-party cameras or when somewhere in your psyche, other people are going to see this, there's a differentiation between that and filming for yourself. Not that one's bad or good, just that there's a difference between those two. Somewhere in your psyche, there's a good potential that it's going to dampen down the experience to some degree, right? It's hard to imagine a psyche that's like, sure, I'll let the whole world see my deepest, darkest pain. As uncontrollable as this experience is, there is amazing mechanisms within our psyche to keep us safe to some degree. So we've seen that a few times. I'm kind of bouncing all around, but I think when somebody wants to film their entire experience, what we'll often suggest to them is that's fine. What I always recommend, just don't watch the footage on the ferry ride out of here. Don't on an hour after you leave, which is a couple days after their experience. Anyway, we do a lot of integration work first, but just let it breathe before you process it by watching it. I don't know what you think about that, but for me, I think there's a difference between the felt experience of 5 and the just allowing it to kind of bubble up in terms of what does this mean for me and what's this all about, compared to watching it, which is very easy to fall into a much more analyzing mindset, which may or may not be super productive in the early days of integration.
Yeah. Well, I think that's great advice for people to potentially not watch it right away. I do like it when people have a video record of their session to potentially go back and review. Yeah. I find it really useful as an integration guide to be able to observe people's sessions and really, as you say, help identify, look at how these emotions are being presented right here. Look at how this energy is being processed or presented. Look at how this is being expressed. But I think, not immediately turning to the video to how was my performance or how did I look? I think that can be good. And then also, you didn't mention this, but even advising people not to watch it on the ferry going, back to the mainland, because even watching something like that could potentially reactivate someone.
Absolutely.
And so that's why, we do need to be careful that this is also the music that might have been used in your session. If people listen to the music, whoa. And then even the sounds that they made in a session, if there's a recording of that and they hear that and then they make those sounds, that also could engender a reactivation. And it should be noted that also just talking about your experience can re-engender some of those emotions and energies, and people can have reactivations by sharing about it. But I do like people to be able to have a record of it, because as we've been talking about, that when in the deepest states, the ego is not there. It doesn't know what you're doing. And this is where there's a really interesting discrepancy. I'm sure that you've encountered this, where someone says, well, it felt like I was really fighting and running around all over the place and screaming and yelling. And then you can show them the video, you were lying there doing nothing. And then the other side, you have people who say, wow, I don't think anything happened. And then you have video recording of them rolling around, screaming, pulling out their hair. And so I think that's very useful for people. Again, not necessarily right away, look at this. But being able to really kind of encounter wow, there's stuff going on in me that I didn't know, or my internal perception was that something was happening, and now I can see at the exterior level something totally different. I think that invites self-inquiry into like, well, what's really going on with me?
Yeah.
Then I also like that you just have security cameras. That I think that this is very important, because this is where, like in the United States, where all of this is done underground. Like a lot of people don't want any filming because, oh, it's underground, we don't want to get in trouble, right?
Sure.
But you kind of hinted at this. Sometimes people going through a session with 5-MeO, they will project a narrative of something that they think has happened or is happening.
Yeah.
And it's completely a projection of the ego. And therefore, having a video recording to demonstrate this is what actually took place, I think is very important. Like there have been times, well, certainly not just have been times, but there are times, oftentimes people will take their clothes off. It happens in 5-MeO experiences. And there, like some facilitators have been accused of removing people's clothing. We don't have video. We do know that often people do strip their clothing off. It's just something that happens. It's not sexual in nature. It's just something that happens. But having video footage to show, like, actually, that was you taking your clothing off, I think that protects the facilitator. And that also sometimes people do act out violently or aggressively or even sexually, the client. And there again, that we do as a facilitator, I think we want to be protected to show like, look, that wasn't me doing that. So I think it serves both the facilitator and it serves the client. There's a lot of purposes for that. But I think it's just problematized in the United States where, again, people are operating underground and in secret. And then some people are, no, this is sacred. You can't film it. That's just something I don't agree with. And then sort of on the opposite end of that, what we see a lot of in Mexico is people filming for their Instagram reels that they wanted as social media cred, which that's something that I am not really approving of.
Yeah, that's like, I think that comes back to in the category of when you're filming for the sake of an audience that has a much higher potential to impact your experience. Now, some people are very comfortable and accustomed to having an audience, and there's a range there. Like somebody like celebrities or something like that are potentially, very comfortable with that. But I think the whole like filming for Instagram thing, it's really easy to actually suppress what could have happened in that experience in order to make a better Instagram, or to overemphasize your experience to make a better Instagram. It's just like anyone who's experienced 5, the ego dissolves and then the ego comes back. And in that coming back, the more we can relax and let just slow down that process and keep staying with the experience, the better off we are. So the more impetus our ego has to jump back in the driver's seat and be like, well, it'd be a really good video if I shrieked and screamed right now, or it'd be a really good video if I said something really smart that I wrote before this, ceremony right now. Those kind of things just can get in the way. And so I think you just got to be super cautious about that. It's not necessarily it's a safety concern only when somebody truly represses something that needed to be expressed because there was a camera in the room, and that repressed something that is now going to be kind of stuck and unstuck at the same time in the system. It's like you've seen where people kind of push through almost, but they don't quite release. And then the next few weeks can be really tough, right? As that bubble comes up and comes out of the system. That can be a really challenging integration.
Absolutely. That's why I like to emphasize this idea of when you're working with 5-MeO, I like to really prioritize, like, let's see the process through to completion in the session, ideally, so that you're not left after the session with like something partly came out or it rose up, but I didn't attend to it, because that does tend to be more difficult. But that's more a facilitation issue. But I think that potentially having cameras, particularly with the idea that this is social media performance, probably potentiates that kind of difficulty where someone's insistence on performing. Like, let's say someone had a kind of challenging experience, but then the ego comes back, and then if they're immediately thinking like, oh, how do I look? And start attending to their appearance or something like that, or, oh, I don't want to seem like I'm freaking out. So then they hold it in. That's where the baby didn't get all the way out, right? That it's like, you were in the process, but now there's some kind of disruption to the process. And so I just think it's an interesting topic. Obviously there's a lot of angles to it.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think, like us making a documentary and filming it back in August, it was a clear decision that said, first of all, we're not going to work with a bunch of people who are naive to 5-MeO and put their first big experience in a film. We're going to be a little nuanced about that, and people who are haven't done enough personal development work that they can kind of handle the complexity of cameras being there and it not totally impinge on their ability to work through what needs to be worked through. And I think we saw that. Like, the ceremonies were huge and they were really powerful and impactful, and the crew was very respectful, and we figured those things out. But for us, it was a weighing of, well, you know what, right now there's not a lot of great footage or stuff of what does it look like to be properly supported in ceremonies. Like, you've done some stuff and but there's a lot of Mexico beach stuff, and we need to kind of counteract that with some more sophisticated, nuanced conversation, especially as these big event type things keep happening, which they will, and 5-MeO keeps bubbling up more and more into the mainstream awareness. We need to be really mindful. Like, how do we educate? How do we bring awareness to what does best practice look like? Like, what does a really well-held facility and facilitation actually look like? Because most people couldn't tell you.
Right. Well, this sounds very interesting. I'm very interested to see this documentary.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So let's talk now about the Leckie Protocol. And,
Sure.
We've already talked a little bit about how prior to getting to the injection plus the vaporization, there's a couple low doses, there's lots of integration, but this is really what we want to focus on.
Yeah.
Should I throw up the graphic now and
Sure.
we can talk about it? Okay, so what we're going to do here is Steve recently posted this to his blog, and so we're just going to take a look at it here. And I've never done this before, recording on Zoom, so I assume that this is just going to take over our screen and the audience will be able to see it. Otherwise, I'll have to insert it editing later, but let's see. So here we have the observed saturation. So tell us about this and how it works, Steve. And this is in reference to, this is basically what we saw in the Bryan Johnson video.
So essentially, first, like, the only context or background I'll give is that, for a long time we were working with vaporized 5-MeO, like most people do, and have, like, that's kind of the traditional route of administration. And then we experienced intramuscular for the first time. This was about 4 years ago, and we loved it. And we thought, oh, we're going to switch over to intramuscular because it's, at that time, the first initial instinct was, oh, it's better than vaporized. That was the first instinct. And then we did some work on a bunch of trials internally, and we worked with a few private clients, and we explored things, and we realized, oh, it's not better, it's just different. And we kind of missed some of the benefits of the vaporized administration, which I could talk a little bit about. But the fundamental difference is vaporized is the classic, 4 to 5 second onset, huge peak non-dual experience, very consistently getting somebody to that non-dual experience, and then a very fast metabolization. So that's represented by the dark green line here, right? So peak right off the top, like, at 0 minutes it's peaked, and then it's basically around the 15-minute-ish mark, it's going to be largely metabolized. And there's lots of variable in that, but let's just keep it simple. And then the intramuscular administration route is definitely a lot smoother for people. So it's more of like at about the 3 minute mark, you start to really 2 to 3 minute mark. And then the onset is up to about 7 minutes is where it fully saturates. And then it holds more consistently. So you get this longer plateau, right? Yeah. So the blue line, and then it trails off much more slowly. So you get a longer window. I think of it as like a therapeutic window to work with the medicine and to continue processing the experience, because a lot of people have these peak experiences, but it's either a whiteout or the psyche just kind of blocks it all out. So you don't come back with much. There's, a lot of times people are like, I don't know, I don't remember any of it. And that's partially true. It's going to trickle back. But what we found is that, so what we loved about the intramuscular was this long tail and this ability to work in the medicine for longer and have more time with it. But we also found that in our own testing and then working with clients, high dose intramuscular is very difficult because it's I would say very difficult to truly get that non-dual peak. You got to dose very, very high. And, you did, I think when you did your video, you did 18, right?
17, 18 milligrams.
Something around there. Yeah. I've done 18 as well. It was one of the more intense experiences and exceptional experiences. And at the 7, and 10 and 12 minute mark, I could still hear a question from my wife, though I had forgotten that I had asked her to ask me, but I was not non-dual. Like I was aware of the question. It was hilarious to me it made no sense, but I heard the question. So it just occurred to me that, and then what we also found is that for a lot of people who are more novice to 5-MeO DMT, high intramuscular doses are just really challenging because you're in the thick of it for a long time, right? I think so. What we found with this administration route is that you get the benefits, the two major benefits. One is that peak breakthrough dose and that huge nervous system opening, the non-dual, and this kind of energetic blast. It's like the sort of energetic dynamite of 5-MeO, which is, I think, in a lot of cases, it's just incredibly powerful. And so that we get that, but then as it metabolizes quite quickly, you land in this lower dose bed of the intramuscular and you get time to stay in the medicine. Your ego doesn't take over quite so fast.
Yeah. So then that's the beige line.
Yeah, that's kind of an estimation of the beige line. And so a lot of people get confused by this when you combine the two numbers, meaning what did you serve somebody as an intramuscular dose and what did you serve somebody as a vaporized dose? It can be confusing because it sounds like a really big number. But when we really think about actual sort of saturation, and this is an estimation, it's very hard to test the blood every minute when somebody is doing 5-MeO. In fact, none of the drug companies have been able to do it yet either. But this is an estimation, but you get the average, the metabolization, we know the half-life of 5-MeO, so you can kind of estimate this. You're never really getting all of that at once, right? The combination, you're kind of getting the first bit and then it's metabolizing quite quickly, and then you're getting that lower dose intramuscular. So that's the basics of the Leckie is generally a high dose vaporized with a low to mid-range intramuscular dose, generally from 6 to 9 milligrams of intramuscular. It's also important to note that depending on what you're working with for intramuscular, that number is misleading because if you're working with succinate, it's really actually about 65% total material. So if you have 9 milligrams of intramuscular, you're really talking about a dose of just over 6, right? So 9 times 0.65.
Okay.
If you're working with HCl, like a different form of salt, it's about 85%. So it's a little bit higher, but mostly what people are going to be finding is succinate. It's actually a more stable final product. It's a better route, but it does have a bigger gap. That sort of 35% of the material is actually the salt wrapped around the 5-MeO DMT.
Okay. So I'm curious. So with this protocol, again, we're showing, so let's assume this is like 6.5 milligram experientially speaking, right? This bottom one, right? So that's a moderate dose. It's not a super high dose, but that's going to get you a lot of time, a lot of experience.
Definitely.
And we have a relatively high dose of the vaporized right away. So we get right into that peak. Then that peak is drawn out a bit longer, and then you kind of return to this more moderate level, and then it's washing out. In contrast, I've encountered some other people who like to work with injectable 5-MeO, and what they've done is start people on a higher injectable dose range and then offer a low dose vape pen.
Oh, to kind of push you through.
Somewhere here during the plateau to kind of boop you up potentially to the non-dual, but then come back down. I'm curious, why are you guys going this way rather than that way? What do you see as the advantages, or is it just this is how the protocol developed?
Yeah, that's an awesome question, and I like that. We've done that as well. We've experimented with that as well, and I think if we are working with someone, so if I was thinking of a session with somebody as a singular thing outside of the context of our entire 5-day process, I would actually probably lean towards something like you're describing, where we're going to start a little lower. And we've done things where we do a 3 milligram intramuscular application, and then a larger one, and then a vaporized somewhere. So we've done things where you're kind of like just easing in, and it's nice and slow, and you've got lots of time. Kind of the classic titration route, which is, pretty classic in 5-MeO as well, the sort of 3-step or whatever. In our case, we've spent 2 days prior to that. They've done 8 mini doses of 8 or so very small doses, which is its own sort of titration ladder over the course of about an hour and a half. We've done some other heart opening work. We've really done a lot of preparation and context building and safety building. And what we just found is that mid-range doses are really tricky for the ego. So as long as we feel like the person's nervous system is kind of like been primed enough and that we have enough safety built with them, I'd rather go straight to the high dose. But the big caveat is, has the proper preparation work been done so that high dose blast isn't in itself traumatizing or in itself jarring. But I think in the context of what we're doing, it makes sense that we've already spent 2 days with the person, getting them prepared for that high dose moment. And I just find that what we found, because we used to be really adamant that you got to titrate up in a session. That was actually our first. We had to really overcome our own bias towards that to do this. And what we found is that if somebody's prepared and they've had the proper preparation in the days leading up, let's just dive in. Let's go straight in and let's skip the wrestling match. Or the wrestling match might happen, but at least you're unconscious for it.
Right. So this is something that people who are not familiar with 5-MeO might have a really difficult time understanding this. Because that idea, if it's presented as, we're going to gradually work you up to that full release dose, and we're just going to ease you gently into it, that might seem really appealing to people. But what people often don't understand is, I always like to say that the ego is, for one, it's incredibly resilient. It takes a lot of energy to actually override the ego. So much so that most people, even with ample years of psychedelic experience with anything other than 5-MeO, they've probably never actually experienced a full ego dissolution experience. They've probably not actually had a full non-dual experience. Most people will get what I would call a non-duality within duality experience, where they say, I'm a part of everything. It's all one thing. We're all in it together. But the full ego dissolution is something quite distinct.
Yeah.
So not only is the ego incredibly resilient, but it's also kind of addicted to doing. Always trying to do, always trying to manage. And so this is where a mid-range dose actually can be very aggravating to the ego.
Totally.
Very uncomfortable. And so what I like about this protocol here is that you're starting people with let's take the full release vaporized dose right away. Because for me, going back to this idea of the diagnostic round, that's what gets the process going.
Yes.
Not the ego struggle on the way up. Let's just start there. And then if we could extend it out, as this model does, through this modality of also having the injection, then you get a lot more time to work with it. And what's kind of echoing something that we've talked about already in this conversation is that a lot of people, and even facilitators, don't really emphasize that when your ego starts to come back, that is actually a really productive part of the 5-MeO experience, as long as you can resist immediately operating from your ego. So, for example, like a facilitator who doesn't understand this, as someone's ego comes back and they look up and you're like, oh, well, I'm back in reality again. And if the facilitator immediately says, hey, how are you doing? How is your experience? And starts trying to talk to that person.
Totally, that's the worst.
It's disrupting their experience. Yes. So if that person could just relax and notice, wow, my ego really wants to look around right now. My ego really wants reassurance that I'm okay. My ego really wants to bring everything back under control. But if we can resist that and not have input from people outside, saying, hey, how are you doing? How is your experience? What's going on? And allowing them that time and space, you get a lot of opportunity to notice where the ego wants to unconsciously come back in control. And also consciously, you notice all these pulls on yourself. And if you just relax, then there's actually more time for more repressed materials to come out, for more energy to process, and to actually get a cleaner system overall. So having this long tail is really, really therapeutic. But again, the important point is that it's therapeutic because the ego gets out of the way in the first place.
That's right. You've already knocked it out of the way in the first place. And then as it's coming back, can you just bring awareness to that, what's happening there, and just look at it like, oh, interesting. This is what I think about. Like, these are all the fears I have. This is all the stories I tell myself, because those all rush back. I mean, and in this case, they come back more slowly. So it's a little more tolerable, a little more gradual, and you have more time in that in-between space, but you've already had the peak experience that has kind of, it's like when you're going into very cold water, like a very cold ocean, and you're trickling, like you're trying to walk in, it can be a lot more difficult than jumping off the dock. Yes. Jumping off the dock is going to be a little more jarring off the top, but you're in. And then you're swimming back to the dock, like that's the tail, versus trickling in, so it's kind of the difference there. And I think if you're well warmed up and it's not going to be dangerous, because I do think if I just show up at somebody's house and I'm just meeting them for the first time and I've never done 5-MeO DMT, and the first thing they do is serve me a massive dose of 5-MeO DMT, I don't think that's a great idea. That doesn't make a ton of sense. But in the contextual framework we're talking about here, this seems to be very, very effective. And kind of gets people into the heart of it without having to move through those ego hurdles of, can I let go? Oh, I'm resisting so much. And then they start beating themselves up before we've even gotten to the high dose.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where this phrase I've been using for years now, I like to say, like, look, just pulling the proverbial rug of reality out from underneath the ego, that actually tends to be the most effective than let's slowly work you into it. Let's gradually get you there. And then we're going to gently pull the rug out. Because again, the ego is resilient, that it is evolutionarily programmed to maintain itself across all circumstances and all space and all time, because that's like the job of the ego, is to be like, no, I'm me, I'm here, I'm aware, so that I can protect myself and I can enact my own agency. And that it just takes a lot in order to convince the ego to say, nothing I can do. Okay, bye. I'm out of here. The life instinct is to hold on.
For sure.
Just to maintain. And so this is this ego death experience. And to facilitate that, it really does take just like, whoop, no more reality for you. Like, here you go. And then it can effectively let go. So this seems to be a very workable model. Something I haven't asked you, but I've been meaning to ask you this whole time. Where does the name Leckie come from? Like, why is it Leckie? Who's
okay?
Leckie?
So the very first person we served this protocol to is a guy named Mike Leckie, and he we said we've been working on this thing and we really think it's amazing, but it's a big one. And we hadn't worked with, and he said, I'm game, I'm in, like, let's go. And he was just so excited about it. And then he had just such a profound experience with it. it just kind of marked it. And then after that, we just started calling it the Leckie Protocol, because just in honor of him. And then we asked him, do you mind if we use your name to name it? Because we were like, oh, we can name it the Enfold this or the. I was like, well, no, let's just have fun. Like let's. A lot of times in science, we name it after some emblem of the actual who are the people involved, what else was happening. And in this case, like, let's honor the first person that we served this to externally, right? That just felt really cool. So mostly just a fun like anecdote that I hope lives on.
Yeah. Okay. The Leckie Protocol. Well, let's get to know the story.
Yeah.
So
can I just say one other thing? I think it's just worth noting for facilitators to know that when we're talking about the intramuscular dose, the vaporized dose, I think it's important that like 5 or 18 milligrams is not 18 milligrams in every device, right? Like one of the things that I think often gets overlooked is how are you vaporizing the material? If you've got like a little Eclipse pipe with the little glass vial and you're heating it up and you're literally serving it right as it's being burnt, I probably wouldn't be hitting 18 very regularly. It'd be a lot lower. It'd be like that 12 to 14 range is 12 and maybe 16 for a really, tight ego, but 12 to 16 is plenty but in our case, we're working with a lamp of light, which is basically, for those who don't know, it's this glass cylinder. It's about 1.5 inches or maybe almost 2 inches in diameter. And it's got this, 8-inch container. So we pre-vaporize the material into this chamber, and then we serve it to somebody. So it's already been vaporized and it sits in that chamber, I don't know, let's say for anywhere from 5 to 10 seconds. And in that time, some of the material is bound to stick to the glass, and it's quite a large surface area. So we are bound to be losing a couple of milligrams in that process, right? So it's good. It's just good to know, like, there's lots of nuance to how, to what device you're using, to how long it sits in the chamber of the device. Some people are using those volcanoes, which are much even, big bags or something like that.
Or surface.
In that case, those kind of lungs, that's a huge surface area, right? So there's just lots of different ways to administer, and just to be aware of knowing, understanding your device and what the considerations are there.
Yeah. How long have you guys been using? I assume it's one of the argon gas lamps, right? So you use it.
Yeah, that's right.
How long have you guys been using that?
We've been using it for probably not too long, maybe 1.5 years, almost 2 years. Before that, we were using an Eclipse.
Yeah. I was probably one of the first people to ever get to use one of those, because when I was
one of Hal's early ones.
Yeah.
Was it Hal, right? Yeah.
Yeah. That when I first went to the Temple of Awakening Divinity at the end of 2007, he had an early prototype of the argon gas vaporizer, and it didn't look anything like it looks now. And I'd never seen anything like it. And I was given some toad secretions, but it ultimately was a small dose. So it was like a nothing experience for me. It was like, yeah, big deal. Like,
I see.
Big deal. So then he invited me back a month later, where he's like, okay, I've got the pure freebase 5-MeO. I've got this new style argon gas lamp with the glass chamber and the little stopper up at the top. So it was brand new at that point. That this was one of the early prototypes. Cool. And yeah, I always share about that experience. I'm watching the stopper go down as I'm taking the hit in, and I got to there. I didn't even take the whole hit. I got to there and I was like, oh, it's happening. And it was from that point on, it's like, this is the most important molecule that exists in reality, that people need to know about what this thing is, because this is like nothing else that exists. But yeah, that was my early claim to fame of the argon gas.
Yeah, that's so cool. Because Hal actually passed on the production of those to another guy who now makes them, and he's very exclusive. Like, you have to be a facilitator that basically gets kind of a referral in to get one of these. And this new guy is also, he's kind of an engineering nerd, and he's figured out how to 3D print all these components and continues to nerd out and improve the whole process and continue to make it more and more of an art piece. He was a little like, we're such minimalists in our design. And we said, could you just make it look like an iPhone? And he was not impressed by that, but he's a lovely guy to work with. But I think he would have liked to put more artistic flourish on it than we allowed him. But they're amazing devices. And the argon is so nice in terms of just the cleanliness of the vaporization, and there's no oxidization, and how smooth the dose is. It's an amazing device for delivery. It's a little, you got to keep it clean. There's a lot of nuance to it, but it's awesome.
Yeah. But it really, in my opinion, it's if we're dealing with inhaling, it's definitely the smoothest route available, and it's the easiest for anybody who doesn't have a prior history or experience with smoking or vaporizing anything. Yeah. Which this is another area where I find in the 5-MeO world, there's more and more people coming to experience 5-MeO who, they didn't smoke cigarettes, they didn't smoke pot, and that the whole concept of like inhaling something is brand new for them. Yeah. That's where I think it just at a functional level, if something is easier, like this is, because again, more people are coming to it without this prior background, that a lot of people find working with toad secretions can be quite challenging if they don't have any experience with smoking or vaporizing, because you have to take in so much, and there's just so much that you're putting into your lungs. It can be quite challenging, but the argon gas vaporizer is just like,
yeah, so good. It was so much. The Eclipse, a lot of people would cough. It's hard to moderate the temperature, so it's too hot coming in. It was an art. This is a lot easier. And then vape pens they have all that carrier oil. They're also quite agitating for the throat. They can cause more headaches and stuff. Like I find the carrier oil gives people headaches and things like that. So it's nice to have a great device for delivery.
Yeah. And then of course, injection. I mean, that's super smooth as well. Oh, yeah. Just this whole model of using the vape with the injection, because, what you've mentioned about the injection, I would also point out that this is a common claim that people make about if they're doing nasal application, they're snorting or using liquid. And then more rarely, most people don't do this, but some people like to do anal plugging route.
Yeah,
but the common complaint about both nasal and anal is people say, well, it doesn't really break through into the non-dual. That even if you up the dose, it's because it's that more gradual up, more gradual down. And because the ego is so inherently resilient that it will reconfigure and modify all the way through and not necessarily have that fundamentally a crisis experience of like, there's nothing I can do here but let go because this is too much. And that's where, again, vaporization really seems to put people over the top, that is the effective method for that full breakthrough.
That's right. And there's a good use case. I think when, all the hum of what happened a little while ago happened, there's lots of people who say, well, you don't need breakthrough doses all the time. And I agree with that. There's sometimes where working with just a lower intramuscular dose in a more, that can be excellent. And the stepwise methodology of stepping into the dose can be a great, very safe way to enter into the process too. However, I don't think that like stepwise, you're familiar with stepwise? There's like this group that's kind of propagating the stepwise. I think they're called.
Not familiar with that then. Yeah.
Okay, they're called the Pattern Project. But honestly, what they did is they picked up. I won't say the names, but some serious old timers that you'd be familiar with, who were the first to go on Arrowhead and say, here's how you make different size pens. And here's how you titrate with pens. You start with a 16-1, then a 12-1, then an 8-1, then a 4-1. And you should, they basically published all that on Arrowhead. And then this group has kind of picked up what they did and branded it and called it stepwise, and the basic premise is that super low dose every 5 minutes, and then every third or fourth or whatever you want to do, you step up to a stronger pen, and you gradually take somebody into potentially a non-dual, or you just stay low. Like one idea is to just do low dose, more therapeutic style, or you take them into a full release. And I just think in terms of the potential for that really big blast breakthrough of the nervous system that a lot of people just need to work through some of that really stuck energy, I don't think that easing in super slowly, like it may feel safer, but it's not necessarily going to be as effective. And there's a use case, but there's a use case for all of these. And I think just being really open to that is important and not being dogmatic. Like I don't think the Leckie Protocol is what everybody should use every time. I just think it's worked very well for us. And in the context of how we're serving this medicine, it's been the most therapeutic thing we've found. And that people tolerate it very, very well. Like for anybody concerned about the dosing or something like that, lots of very average non-psychonaut type people tolerate it very well and have excellent results,
Yeah. And one of the things that I always like to emphasize around low dose work with 5-MeO is that I've always been like, look, if that's what you want to do, that's fine. I personally am very interested in the full release dose and what that entails, what that involves, and how do we educate people around that and how do we work with it effectively. But setting those things aside, I always like to really emphasize that it's really important that everybody understand that small or moderate doses with 5-MeO, they just don't inform you about what the full release experience actually is. And
almost a different drug or a different substance.
It's so different that we just don't want to have a mistaken understanding. If people are only working with small or medium doses, it's not really accurate for them to say that they know what 5-MeO does because they don't. And that's because, see, this can be misleading where if somebody thinks like, okay, well, yeah, I know what that is. So go ahead, like, give me the full thing. It's just going to be more of what I've already experienced. That's where it's like, no, we're going into a completely different realm of experience here. So that's where I just like to emphasize, like, please understand that once we're beyond that threshold, it's something totally radically different. And here we can also use the language of duality versus non-duality, that 99% of all our experience is grounded in duality. That's not that it's bad, but there is a subjective sense of self that is in context with everything that it perceives as not itself, and it is situated in space and time. But once we go into the non-dual, all of this dissolves. And there is no ego there to process it. This is a different order of experience, and no amount of work in the dual realm actually informs what the non-dual experience is, just by definition, because the non-dual is not that. So whatever happened in duality, this is not that.
Not that. I appreciate that a lot. And I think one thing, to the Pattern Project's credit, they've coined this phrase low 5, and I think we should, like, it would be great if we really, in our minds and everyone understood low 5 is a different thing than high dose 5 work. It's just as you're saying, a fundamentally different experience. It's as if you're doing two different substances. Both could be beneficial. My bias is more towards yours. It's like the non-dual experience is what we're really specialized in and what this is all about to us. It's about getting people to that experience and getting them through that experience and making the most of the potential of whatever comes up there, whether it's total resistance and terror or total bliss and beauty.
Yeah. Well, Steve, I have you for almost 2 hours now, so I think I'm going to be wrapping up and letting you go. But I did want to touch on, in the blog post that talks about the Leckie Protocol, where we've shared the graphic that we've discussed here, it also mentions some research that's going on in Canada, in your neck of the woods. Could you tell us a little bit about that and where researchers in Canada are looking at 5-MeO and how Enfold might be contributing to that?
Yeah, sure. So a couple of things that are happening. One is we've just wrapped data collection on our own observational study. And the data collection was done in partnership with the University of Toronto and UHN, which is a big hospital, research hospital group in Canada. It's now been passed to we're just in the process of signing all the documents, but I think it's safe to say we're going to be writing the paper on this research with the New School in New York, with some awesome researchers there. And I'm really excited about this because it is, even before we started the study, I take meticulous notes. So for at about the 200 ceremony mark, I started taking meticulous notes. So I have about 500 ceremonies documented. How long did it take? What did we witness in terms of energetic or emotional responses? How much was the dosing? How long did it take? What did we experience phenomenology wise throughout the journey? So it's like there's like a kind of a play-by-play. So I have these I take pretty solid notes on all these ceremonies. So this research will be able to capitalize on all of that data, as well as both before, during, and after, basically at the 1 week, I think 1 month and 3 month mark post intervention with guests, so their own experience. And as far as I know, I think it'll be one of the most comprehensive looks at 5-MeO DMT, where it's been like repeated. The dosing is consistent. A lot of the factors are highly consistent. And then we can actually look at what happens, where a lot of the 5-MeO observational research is web-based, which is, have you smoked 5-MeO DMT? Come fill out our survey, which somebody did it on the couch, somebody did it with a facilitator, somebody did it in a group, somebody did it alone. It's hard to really gain a solid footing of what does 5-MeO do. And so we're really excited about that. And it will also really emphasize the fact that this was done in a multi-day container with these other elements, and bring that into the research realm, which I think is important to stop being so kind of isolationist in terms of, let's just talk about 5-MeO, the molecule, versus was there music playing? Was there facilitation? What did they get in terms of integration? All those kind of very important details that often get left out of scientific research. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, and to have something that's been consistent over time, I think is really valuable, because as you say, a lot of the research has been done at a survey level. And there, we're not really controlling for all of these other factors. And like we've been discussing, like the other people in the room can make a difference. The room can make a difference. How the facilitator works makes a difference. What kind of music might be played, that makes a difference. So these are all really important questions. So having a consistent container and a consistent methodology over time, I can see that be very, very valuable. And I'm glad that you guys are contributing to that. That, when I started talking about 5-MeO on my podcast in 2008, that, I was kind of doing this public broadcasting of like, Johns Hopkins University, why aren't you researching 5-MeO DMT? MAPS, why aren't you researching 5-MeO? That I was trying to challenge people to actually research it, but it's only now that really 5-MeO research is online and it's happening, and really happy for that. But like if we were comparing, like, what's the data from people being served on the beach in Mexico versus in a therapeutic context that takes all of these steps around preparation, facilitation, and integration. Like, that's the big thing down in Mexico. There's almost zero preparation and almost zero integration.
That's right.
And a completely uncontrolled setting. Like, that is not a good setting to be generating data from.
Yeah. And so it'd be interesting, like when our study comes out, if somebody wanted to replicate or say, well, let's go talk to, we did 50 people here. Let's go follow 50 people who do it in a tent in Tulum for $150. And let's see if we can follow them a week before and a month after, and these kind of things. Let's just compare the results. That would be, I don't want anybody to honestly access 5-MeO DMT in that way, but it's going to continue to happen. So what if we compare those two? Or my hope also is just that this study will influence further studies which might incorporate more of our elements. So, it's interesting. The Leckie Protocol is us really saying, hey, we've spent 4 years developing this protocol. Here it is in its entirety: dosing, amounts, all the we give away a lot of our secret sauce, or whatever you want to call it, as a small business. But like, if we're not upscaling the entire, the entire way that this medicine is being served, then we're not really doing a duty. And I think the same thing with the research. So the research will reveal even more details about the elements of our process. And that to us is great, because it just puts it in the field and it starts to make it commonplace that you would expect, as a person seeking 5-MeO, you might actually just expect that now, as opposed to thinking, oh yeah, I guess the beach on 5-MeO, the beach in Mexico is fine. You've learned because you've read a research study that said, hey, these guys had a couple of nights with their facilitators and they had integration calls and they had these steps. Like, do you do that when they're seeking their 5-MeO facilitator? So I hope, I think for all of us, that you've been doing this for years, is just as this continues to raise public awareness around this medicine, what do we do to backfill the education layer? That's not going to happen at the celebrity level exactly, It's kind of like, that's when the experts got to step in and say, here's here's how you actually do this super well. And I think, some things that are happening, I thought the way that the whole thing with Bryan, the way he talked about it afterwards, I was actually pretty impressed. I thought he did a great job. Yeah. But there will be further guys that come, there'll be other people that do it that will say stuff that you and I cringe hard at. Yeah, it's inevitable. Some famous actor or something is going to do it, and they're going to say, everyone should do it. It's a beautiful white light experience. And they're going to say it to 50 million people. And we're going to go, oh, my God.
Yeah. Well, I don't know the guy's name, but this comedian, I saw a clip of him on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. This was a number of years ago. I forget the guy's name. He's kind of had like a big sort of afro, but he said, he was telling Stephen about how, oh yeah, I went down to Tulum and I smoked some toad. And Steve was like, oh, what was that like? He's like, it was great. It was like getting shot out of the asshole of God. That's not the way I would articulate it. But what I liked about Bryan Johnson is like I saw an interview with him with some guy like the day after, or maybe just a couple days after. And I appreciated that he said, I'm struggling for words to describe this, but this was the absolute pinnacle of human experience. And I don't know much more to say about it than that. Something like that. And so I like that. I like that. And even that shows a certain level of vulnerability and openness to say, like, I'm not sure how to talk about it. I'm still not certain what I think, that he's not pressuring himself to like, I have to have a definitive answer. But I really appreciate that he said, like, I don't think that there's an experience that a human being can have that's bigger than this. And because that's something I've always tried to emphasize about 5-MeO. And again, when I first started speaking about this publicly in 2008, this is a place where it just pissed a lot of people off, because there's like, how could you say that? Like, what makes you think like this is so much is different than anything else? It's like, look, it just is like this really is something profoundly special, and it's profoundly different. So I like what he had to say about it, but I think that that's maybe more useful than like getting shot out of the asshole of God. That's kind of a fun image. I guess, I don't want to be prudent about it. Not necessarily the most accurately descriptive, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Steve, thanks so much for your time today to explore this further with me and to agree to make this video. And hopefully this will help generate more discussion for people and more understanding. And let's just close with, so if people do want to go to Canada and work at Enfold, how do they do that? What's the process for applying for doing this work with you guys?
Yeah, thanks, man. I really appreciate this conversation as always. I feel like you and I could probably go for 5 hours at a time. Yeah, so it's good to just cap it somewhere. But if people are curious, our website is Enfold, ENFOLD.org. It's really, we have a ton of information. We're very public. We explain a lot about our thesis and our ideas. And there's an application form there that people can fill out. And we do a really rigorous screening with everybody. So if you're ever curious about this medicine, because I think sometimes you listen to these types of conversations with experts, and we say a lot of gnarly things. Like this is intense, and no doubt. But we do a really good job of, we take it really seriously to, I guess, educate and screen people thoughtfully and really make sure, is this the right time? Is this the right medicine? And if it is, we'll, be very clear about that. But we'll also sometimes just say, hey, this is an amazing medicine, and maybe the first step for you would be something a little bit more accessible. And so I think if you're curious, just reach out, and we're happy to chat and see if it's a good fit.
All right. Well, thanks, Steve. Thanks for doing the good work. Thanks for sharing this information with me and with whoever you are, the audience out there. And I'm sure we'll have more conversations in the future, because there's always a lot to talk about here. But
yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
Thanks, Martin.
Yeah, great to see you again. Okay.